Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, distill the key insights, and really give you the essential context on the big issues. And today, well, we're diving deep into something incredibly complex and moving fast. The Israel-Iran conflict. It's now in its second week, and crucially, the U.S. is directly involved. We've gathered a whole stack of reports, research, analysis, everything from today, June 23rd, 2025, our mission, to help you grasp what's happening, the immediate impacts, and, the deeper forces at play. We'll cover the military moves, the human cost, which is significant, the diplomatic scrambling, and the political and economic fallout. It's a lot, but we'll unpack it for you. All right, let's jump right in. The latest on the ground.
Well, the scale of military action has really ramped up.
Right.
Dramatically. So on the Israeli side, we're seeing these wide-ranging airstrikes on Tehran. Israel's defense ministry is reporting hits on Iranian government sites, and notably, Evin Prison. That's a notorious place for political prisoners.
Yeah, targeting Evin isn't just military, it's symbolic. It hits at the regime's control, its image. It's a very pointed strike. And there was another strike overnight on the nuclear facility near Isfahan.
That's right, Isfahan. It's been hit before in this conflict, so it's clearly a priority target.
And it's not just single targets, is it? It seems like a broader campaign.
Exactly. It's about degrading capability. Israel seems focused on Iran's missile tech, drones, air defenses. Specifically, they seem to be going after Iran's ability to make solid fuel for their ballistic missiles. That's key.
Why solid fuel specifically?
Well, solid fuel missiles are faster to deploy. They're more advanced, more immediate threats. Hitting that production aims at degrading their long-term rapid strike capability, not just, hitting back for recent attacks.
Okay, makes sense. And Iran's response? They fired missiles too, right?
They did. Launched a missile strike towards Israel. Israeli air defenses intercepted it, though.
But that's not all. There are threats now against U.S. assets.
Yes, this is a big development. Iranian officials are indicating they might be preparing to attack the U.S. Al Udeid air base in Qatar.
Al Udeid. That's the huge one, right? Largest U.S. base in the Middle East.
That's the one. And this threat is explicitly linked to retaliation for the recent U.S. strikes on Iran.
Which explains why the U.S. and U.K. told their citizens in Qatar to shelter in place.
Precisely. And Qatar even closed its airspace temporarily. It shows how seriously that threat is being taken.
And domestically, Iran's activating air defenses.
Yeah, Fars news agency, state-affiliated, reported air defenses active in Abbas, intercepting what they called hostile targets. So they're on high alert internally, too.
This threat against Al Udeid, it feels like a major escalation.
It absolutely is. It directly challenges the U.S. presence, forces the U.S. to calculate risks to its own people and major assets. It's not just tit for tat anymore. It's raising the stakes significantly. A dangerous game of coercion.
And then the really huge development, the U.S. strikes, Sunday, June 22nd.
Yes, targeting 3 key Iranian nuclear facilities. Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. These are the heart of their program enrichment. Heavy water.
President Trump claimed they were totally obliterated. Strong words.
Very strong. Though it's important to note, U.S. officials also said damage assessments were still ongoing. So obliterated might be, let's say, premature.
The operation had a name, Midnight Hammer.
Operation Midnight Hammer, yes.
Yeah.
And interestingly, reports suggest it used decoys, deception, and met no Iranian resistance at the time.
No resistance. That's surprising.
It is. It raises questions. Was it a lapse in their defenses? Or maybe a strategic choice not to engage U.S. forces directly at that moment? Hard to say for sure.
And targeting Fordo, that's the one buried deep underground, isn't it?
Exactly. Previously thought almost untouchable, hitting it signals a new level of U.S. capability or perhaps willingness to escalate.
Alongside these strikes, the U.S. also warned Iran about the Strait of Hormuz.
A crucial warning. That strait is a vital choke point for global oil. What, something like a fifth or more of the world's oil goes through there?
Something like that, yeah.
Closing it. I mean, that wouldn't just spike oil prices. It would send massive shockwaves through the global economy. China, other big buyers, they'd feel it immediately. It can trigger a much wider crisis.
Okay, so the military picture is incredibly tense. But let's shift focus. Beyond the strategy and the hardware, what's the human cost? What are our sources telling us about the impact on people?
It's grim. Really grim.
Mm-hmm.
In Iran, the health ministry numbers are at least 430 civilians dead, 3,500 injured since this phase started on June 13th.
And there are independent groups with higher numbers.
Yes. The human rights activist news agency claims 722 total fatalities, and that includes almost 200 military personnel. So potentially much higher civilian casualties too.
And in Israel.
At least 24 people killed, over 1,000 injured since Iran's retaliation began. 16 of those were wounded just in a recent Iranian missile barrage.
These numbers, they really underscore the human tragedy unfolding.
Absolutely. And it's not just the direct casualties.
Right, the environmental concerns too. Radioactive leaks.
There are definitely concerns being raised about potential leaks from the nuclear sites that were hit. Iranian authorities claim no hazardous materials escaped, but, concerns remain.
And the disruption to daily life must be immense. Evacuations, travel halted.
Yeah, the British RAF had to fly UK nationals out of Israel because commercial flights stopped. That tells you something.
And inside Iran, internet blackouts.
Continued severe disruptions. There was even a near total blackout reported earlier. It cuts people off, makes getting information incredibly hard.
And displacement in Israel. You mentioned Tel Aviv.
Yes, over 5,100 people classified as homeless across Israel, and that includes over 900 just from Tel Aviv. People forced from their homes by the attacks.
So for civilians caught in this, the immediate future looks bleak.
Incredibly bleak. Displacement, blackouts, the potential environmental risks. These aren't abstract numbers. They reshape societies, public feeling. It really poses a question for you, our listener. How do these direct human impacts affect the bigger picture? Does it change public support? Does it alter the course of the conflict itself? The human side is absolutely critical here.
Okay, so with these high stakes, the human suffering, how is the rest of the world reacting? What's happening on the diplomatic front? How is Iran playing this internationally?
Iran's been very active, actually. Foreign Minister Araghchi went to Moscow, met with Putin, discussed responses to the U.S. strikes.
Aligning with Russia, predictably.
Right. And they've also formally asked the UN to condemn the U.S. actions.
Are they talking about negotiation at all?
They've expressed willingness to negotiate, but here's the catch. They are absolutely firm on continuing their nuclear program. They reject U.S. demands for zero enrichment completely.
So willing to talk, but not on the core issue from the U.S. perspective.
Exactly. It's a very steadfast position. Makes finding common ground extremely difficult. A core inflexibility, really.
And the wider international community. You said fractured.
Deeply fractured. The UN Security Council had an emergency meeting. The UN chief, Guterres, warned about a deadly downward spiral. That's stark language.
Did anyone support the U.S. strikes?
Well, several council members strongly criticized the U.S.-led strikes. The Gulf states, Qatar, Oman, UAE, Saudi Arabia, they're all alarmed. Qatar warned of catastrophic consequences.
Understandable, given their proximity.
Definitely. And further afield, countries like Cuba, Chile, Venezuela condemned the strikes, calling them violations of international law.
And Iran's allies in the region.
Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen all denounced the attacks. Hezbollah called them barbaric and treacherous. Russia, too, through Medvedev, condemned the U.S. and Israeli actions, saying most nations opposed them.
So a lot of condemnation. Any notable support for the U.S. position?
The U.K. Prime Minister Keir Starmer explicitly supported the U.S. strikes, citing the threat from Iran's nuclear program.
So a key ally stands with the U.S. Anyone else?
Australia and New Zealand are mostly just calling for de-escalation, for diplomacy, trying to lower the temperature.
It really paints a picture of deep division, no consensus at all.
None. And that reflects those long-standing geopolitical fault lines, doesn't it? Alliances, rivalries, they shape how everyone reacts. It makes finding a unified diplomatic path incredibly hard.
Okay, let's pivot then. Internal politics, strategy, economics. Inside the U.S., you mentioned debate, even splits within parties.
Yes, quite a bit of debate. Key Democrats, Sarah Jacobs, Hakeem Jeffries, Rashida Tlaib, called the strikes unconstitutional, arguing Trump needed congressional approval.
And some Republicans agreed on the constitutional point.
Interestingly, yes. Thomas Massie, a Republican, echoed that concern about congressional authority.
But other Republicans supported Trump.
Some did, like Senator Roger Wicker, though even he urged caution. But what's perhaps more surprising are the splits within Trump's own base. Figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Steve Bannon. They've expressed skepticism about getting deeper into this.
So not even unified support within his own movement. That's significant.
It is. It suggests a lack of broad domestic consensus, which could affect how sustainable this policy is long-term.
And in Iran, what's the situation with the leadership?
Supreme Leader Khamenei is reportedly in a secure bunker. And they've actually implemented emergency succession measures, named 3 potential successors. That signals real fear of assassination.
Wow. And President Pezeshkian?
He's vowing a response to the aggression, naturally, but importantly, he also stated Iran doesn't want war. So it's this balancing act, sounding tough, preparing for the worst, but maybe trying to keep a lid on total escalation.
What about Israel's objectives? Netanyahu claims they're close to their goals.
That's the claim. Dismantling Iran's nuclear program is the stated top goal. Some analysts are even suggesting, perhaps optimistically, that success against Iran might give Israel more flexibility in the Gaza ceasefire talks.
But do experts think even U.S. help guarantees Israel achieves those goals, like regime change?
That's where the skepticism comes in. Our sources highlight analysis warning that even with U.S. muscle, long-term goals like regime change are probably unrealistic, and the risk of further destabilizing the region is huge.
Drawing in groups like Hezbollah, the Houthis?
Exactly. They've already threatened U.S. assets. A wider conflict involving these proxies is a very real danger.
And the claims about obliterated sites might be overstated?
Potentially, yes. Damage assessments take time. And Iran's nuclear program is dispersed. Some parts are buried deep. It's unlikely these strikes were a single knockout blow, despite the rhetoric. Iran's defenses, even if bypassed this time, are designed to be resilient.
Okay, finally, the economy. Oil prices are volatile.
Extremely volatile. All eyes are on that Strait of Hormuz threat. As we said, it's critical. Any disruption there hits global markets hard, especially big buyers like China.
And other countries are feeling the ripple effects.
Yes, South Korea's security officials already held meetings specifically to discuss the impact of these strikes on their economy and security. It shows how interconnected everything is.
So putting it all together, complex pressures, unclear outcomes.
Absolutely. All sides are facing internal debates, pursuing strategic goals that might be contradictory or even unattainable. The U.S. involvement ramps up the risk massively. Diplomacy seems stalled on the core issues, like the nuclear program.
And the human cost just keeps rising.
Tragically, yes. It underscores this urgent need for de-escalation, but right now, both sides seem locked into a military path.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's just incredibly clear. The Israel-Iran situation, now with direct U.S. strikes, is a crisis on multiple fronts. Military, human, diplomatic, political, economic. It touches everything.
Yeah, we've seen the intense military actions, the devastating human toll, the fractured global response, and those complex internal dynamics.
And to expect some talk of negotiation.
The core positions seem really entrenched. The risk of this spinning out into a wider regional war feels very, very real right now.
So for you, our listeners, something to think about. UN officials are warning of that deadly downward spiral. Both sides seem committed to military options. So here's the final thought. What new approaches, what unexpected alliances, or maybe completely different frameworks for diplomacy might actually be needed here, especially when the traditional tools seem to be struggling to keep up with how fast things are escalating?